call signs fancy.
Episode 2. We made it. Chris is
episode 2.
I know, man. Episode 2, which it doesn't feel like a lot, but making it to 2 feels like more. I'll be honest. Like once you get to episode 10, you're like, oh shit, like there's a little bit of commitment to this thing.
Yeah.
It's almost like we've kind of found our niche or our niche in this.
There
and
we
so
go.
yeah, you like that? You like that segue, Steve?
Right.
Throw right into it. So let's just lead with that, because I have some cool things I wanted to add on top of that thought process. I really liked the piece from the blog, Steve, from this month. I really liked it because it sits very heavy to me when I look at when I look at purpose and I look at driving things forward. And that's kind of built on top of what you said with niche. But Steve, why don't you take it away and talk about what you meant by niche, how that drives forward, and kind of start the conversation off by maybe giving some of our listeners who haven't read that piece that's on our social accounts, and then kind of go into your mentality of it, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah. So finding your niche is a unique thing, and it's not necessarily, what it is that you love to do. Maybe initially, maybe you grow into it. Finding your niche really is finding what you're good at, and then what you will enjoy doing. And so, how do you go about doing that? Because if you do something that you love, maybe it's not necessarily something that you're really good at, or, maybe it's just a hobby and it doesn't make money and it doesn't really grow. So, it's a really an interesting endeavor to really focus on in life when it comes to, your professional life. And so, how do you go about finding your way in building your leadership qualities and style over time? And so, in this week's section of the blog, we talk about finding your niche. And, I would recommend, start with what you like, because, what is going to really motivate you at the beginning of anything. You have to enjoy it. And so it's good to find some sort of motivation, and that's an easy internal motivator, is doing something that you like. So, when I was younger, I enjoyed playing football and I liked history. So, as odd as that is for a young person to really like history, everybody else hated history. So, those are the things that I did. And then, I grew into those things. And so, yeah, from there, I was able to network and be able to, develop skills and qualities, attributes, being inquisitive with the history, becoming a good researcher, with the football, becoming a good team player, being, enjoying physical challenge, which, helps with, resiliency overall in terms of being fit, both physically, mentally, etc. So, yeah, you go down that road and you figure out where that leads you. Sometimes that'll help you with in terms of networking and finding your way and finding other things. Maybe it's not football that winds up being your profession, because that's a rarity, honestly. So, that way you build up those qualities, and then you seek out opportunity wherever they come along. So for me, the opportunity was with the ROTC at college. I had a good background with football and having that team environment, developing physically, developing my ability to engage with others in a team setting, and that translated really well to the ROTC, where I was able to find a really good core group of individuals that were also highly motivated, fit, intelligent, and that meshed well with me, and they inspired me, and likewise I wound up inspiring them in our group there. And so I was able to stick with it for 4 years and come out on the other end as an officer in the infantry for the Army. So how about you, Rob? What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to me, and this is a unique piece to kind of what you said in the beginning, which was, you want to find something that you're good at and kind of pursue that and take it forward. Niche, to me, and I think this resonates a lot with kind of the younger generations, and we sit on and Chris, I think, is a little bit full in the Gen X piece, but we sit in that kind of like elder millennial category. Like right on that window where it's like, I don't want to be called a millennial, but technically
I don't identify as such, but I guess I'm in that bracket.
And I've got you by a couple years. And so it even like we sit on that, like, I think we're that one generation that had a digital adulthood, but a analog childhood, right? Like I didn't have
8-bit anyway.
Yeah, 8-bit at least, right? But that was the big piece that I think resonates as you look kind of towards the younger generations, is it's not so much finding just what you're good at, but it's finding what you love and trying to make that your career. And I think when you look at leadership, it's really important to look at that, because for me, that's been my piece. Is I found what I was good at, kind of the same as you. I actually wanted to join the military to fly helicopters. That was the whole piece I came in. And so I had a long and less than illustrious college career, which we've had many conversations about. But what I'd done is I'd done and filled out my warrant officer paperwork to go be a warrant and fly helicopters. And I was like, I should figure out this whole Army thing. And so I'll do an ROTC class. And the way ROTC ropes you in, they're like, oh, you want to go fly? Well, you can fly as an officer. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'll stay an extra 2 years. I still had eligibility in hockey, and I'll hang out. It's a niche. I enjoyed what I was doing, and maybe I'll find out a little bit more what this Army thing's about. Well, I found out that I really enjoyed, and I was also very good at that kind of tactical level leader, right? I found that infantry side of things, that maneuver side of things, I found I was good at it. And so when that kind of pushed forward, flying went to the wayside. I found I was good at that. And then it transitioned forward through my platoon leader time, my XO and company time, and then into CA and the special operations side, which is where, again, we all have those moments where you find that piece you're good at. And I gravitated towards that kind of strategic and not necessarily non-lethal, but the more, how would I say this? The more diplomatic approach to shaping environments. I found that I'm good at it, and I really enjoy it. I'm a people person. I can be around people all day long. And so I found my niche in there. But I think where that transition for me, where this transitions from niche to passion, is really when I left the military. And when I left the military to go join Waves for Water and began leading disaster relief missions and transitioning away from, I was still taking the same skills that I'd learned in the military and similar roles on how to leverage decentralized networks and build teams out of nothing and lead them to a common goal. But now I was starting to kind of understand this shift in thought process from just finding something you're good at and finding your role that you could be comfortable in, to finding something that really is a passion and driving you forward. I think that's one of the reasons we see a huge shift towards entrepreneurship in a lot of these younger ones, which is like, find your passion, find what you love, and then make that your job, vice the other way around. Yeah. If we go back to our parents and our grandparents, we're talking about a totally different animal, where it was like, find your job, be the best you can at your job, and transition that forward. And then that's your career. Now we're at the place where I think the average staying time for a millennial is less than 5 years. Chris, you and I had a really good conversation about this kind of on, and I don't know if it fits with niche and passion and purpose, but we were talking about this, where the thought process in younger employees and younger leaders has shifted to where if you don't have at least that niche, where like, hey, this is something I'm proud of, what I'm good at. Like, now you're looking at the other aspect of it. So how do you lead these people and going forward? And Chris, I think you had some interesting things from Chanel's work.
Right, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's going to lead to resiliency too, which is another topic for another time. But being where you want to be and being proud of your work is going to increase your desire to be there. And I think niche, as we're talking about it, is kind of where your passion and your talent intersect. And so it's finding that, because when you get to that, that's kind of a happy place, right? And when you're in your happy place, you're more receptive to the world around you. So you learn more from the leaders that you engage with, from the people that you're working with, from everything in the environment that you're a part of. And I think being in that place allows you to develop your skills and allows you to understand your capabilities a little bit more. I think how you find that is, I mean, it's trial and error. So the more stuff that you expose yourself to, you're not necessarily born knowing what your passion is or what your talents are, but we find that out through trial and error. There's things that we want to be good at, but we suck at. And there's things we think we're passionate about, But when you find, whether it's the amount of effort it takes or the skill sets or whatever it is, it may not line up with what you want to do. So finding that is the tricky part. And the only way we can do it is by trying. So getting out there and doing it.
No, that's exactly it. So I'm trying to remember with that rapid turnover and talking about this from a leadership perspective, right? Like, I think it's really important to look at it from, okay, so for me to be a good leader, I really have to believe in my mission or my job or whatever my passion is. Like, I have to believe in that. It's really hard to actually lead people forward if your only thing you care about is what are my numbers for next quarter. Like, you have to really believe in it, or at least be very proud of how you perform in it. I think that's essential as a leader, because I think we all agree that as a leader, follow me is a pretty big thing. Like, if I can't believe it and move forward, you're going to see through that in a heartbeat. And
Absolutely.
I think niche and passion are a critical piece with that, right? Like, if I don't have that belief and if you can't see in me how much I care about this, you're not going to follow me to the extent. You're just going to do your job and move forward, and you're going to turn forward. So I think this goes to kind of taking it from niche is like, okay, so not only how do I impart on the people that I'm leading? How do I impart my passion and my belief in our mission or our goal? How do I impart why it's important to me? And then how do I help show you that this is your niche and your passion as well, right? Like, how do I identify the talents in my team and their passions and kind of mold them together and be like, see, this is why you're good at this, is because it ties into who you are. So I don't know, niche to me, I think it lends to 15 to 20 different conversations we could have about leadership. But I wanted to kick it back over either to Chris or Steve, because I know we talked before, Chris, about like different techniques different companies are doing, from sabbaticals, from rewarding and different things to keep people moving down that line. But then I also wanted to tie back to Steve on, like, really when you look at this and from your initial conversation, like, how did your niche lead you to where we are now with this? Because I think this has become more than a niche, and really, to what Chris said, like, it's where passion and talent intersect, which I really like that term. And I think Chris is probably going to get clip of the day again, with niche is really where your passion and talent intersect, and it makes you very effective both as a leader and as a teammate.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree with that passion and talent there, because I definitely develop my talents along being able to organize things, being able to bring order from chaos, being able to, manage projects, being able to lead people. And then that really contributed to being successful on the job as an officer in Special Forces. Then I really developed a passion for the idea of leadership, and really going beyond leadership and mentorship, because, like, I think that you're not truly 100% a leader if you're not also mentoring, because as a leader, you need to be able to give vision, guidance, and direction to those around you in order to achieve whatever it is that goal is, or whatever that purpose is. And if you're not capable of doing that through an effective engagement, then you're not quite there, I don't think. So, and I think that as I grew and I matured over the course of my career, and I got to, like, company command, for instance, that was really where I learned to become that mentor, because you see where there are deficiencies as you look across your organization, and you want to correct it. And how do you go about correcting it? Not in a way that's going to really irritate somebody. You need to get them to be on board with you, get buy-in, etc. And you need to learn how to effectively engage with them. And what does that mean? How do they best accept information? Is it through email? Is it through a phone call? Is it face-to-face? And just figuring out how people receive you the best, and then just have a conversation with them, have a dialogue, and allow them to absorb things so that they can figure out what the context is, and then move forward in development.
And that also brings up a good point about on the leadership side of it, and going back to how you find your niche. One of the ways is through your leaders, through people you interact with. And that also, the flip side of that is, as a leader, helping your subordinates, helping the people who work for you, find what they're good at, find what they're passionate about. I mean, I definitely have people throughout my career that have affected my development and help me to understand what it is that I am good at, or put me in positions where I succeeded, which is again a hallmark of a good leader, is knowing enough about their people to know what they're good at, know what they want to do, and put them in positions and train them for success. And then that just fosters that niche, or fosters that passion, if you will, working for a good leader who can put you in that position.
Yeah, and
Chris,
I think that. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. All right, thanks. Chris, I think to build off that, that's a really good learning point that I had when I started, when the clean water course started to gain a little traction and we had a larger pool of people to dig from, because especially working with volunteers and leading volunteers is insanely hard, because there's no accountability at any moment. Like if their interest is not captured, they're just not going to do it. And no fault on them. They're giving their free time and their own work to it. So it was interesting as a learning point when I was running the Clean Water Corps and getting it going, is trying to find those little niches that I could put people into. And it took a lot of failures. Like I would ask somebody to do it where I believed that task would get done because they believed in the overarching purpose. And we all had a passion to try to, one, get veterans into disaster relief and humanitarian situations for our own buildup and like not rehab, but that support structure that it provided, but also that we all believed that, clean water was a right and we needed to help people get it. And so that was there as the larger piece, but I noticed that like smaller level, so we may have had a larger passion for the in-state. At that smaller level, if I couldn't find that passion for the task that I'd asked them to do, or if I couldn't find where their talent lied and help them kind of grow and become better, or show it as an opportunity to expand on that talent and become better, or at least kind of showcase that talent, we really missed the mark. And that was a huge learning curve for me. I don't know how many times I would ask for something to get done. It was the wrong person at the wrong time to kind of go through that process. And that's a big piece. And I think that fits with niche. Is it's not just the big purpose and passion, but it has to get down to that specific role or that specific task that you're trying to motivate somebody to do. So I want them to take ownership of it, which is incredibly important. But two, I also want it to be the right role for the right person. And in the military, I mean, I think we were always told, like, if I couldn't get somebody to do something, it's like, well, that's a leadership challenge. You're doing it wrong. Right. But you don't have any flexibility. Like my flexibility is, okay, this is the dude's job. He's not good at it. I either have to fire him, which we all know is very difficult to do, or I have to make him better at his job. I don't get to move him around to a different role very often. And
you go to war with the army that you're provided, not the army you want.
Right. That's exactly it. But the civilian world is not that way. And that was a learning point for me. I kept trying to drive things home. Like, this is what I have. I was like, whoa, take a step back. Look at my organization. Look at the people I have that are working for me, and find the right role for the right person at the right time and be able to manage that. And then, I found out I was much more productive. We made much more headway in that window. And that was a big learning point. You don't have to always work with the army you have at that time. You may have to pick up some of the slack on your own until you can find the right person. But a lot of times it's like, how do you leverage the strengths in your team to get them into the right niche, to make them happy and take ownership of that piece, and then drive things forward. It's different than the military a lot, but I think the same lessons apply.
But there are some things, right? There are some things that are actually very similar in the fact that going forward and inspiring people or putting people in the right job where they are successful not only makes them enjoy the job, but it builds faith in the organization itself as well. I have a story I've thrown out a few different times. A guy on my team, of which there are many similar stories over the years, but going through Special Forces selection, everybody in the unit is top notch, has been through some difficult training and proven themselves. So they're all squared away guys, but everybody still has strengths and weaknesses. And there was one particular guy on one of my teams. If we were going to go hit a house, he was my number one guy in the door. If somebody needed to be on a gun or sit out in an OP watching something, he was my number one go-to guy. But for key leader engagements, for engaging with people, he sat on the gun truck because that was not his forte. And I saw instances of not just this guy, but people throughout their careers being put in those positions. The guy that shouldn't be talking to people, or the guy that shouldn't be the number one man in the door, you put him in there, he's going to fail. or he's not going to do as good a job as he could. And there's a cascading negative series of effects that go along with that. So really understanding where to plug your people in. And that being said, self-evaluating and self-assessment as well of where you are good and what you're good at.
Right. And so I think that's where, like, having talked about my history background, that has come into play for me, is that I just have a natural thirst for knowledge, and I'm interested in the people around me. And by becoming, and by getting to know them, by getting to figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are, by engaging with them, then I've been able to do just like what you've described there, put them in the right spot, according to their strengths and their weaknesses, to create that functional and interoperable team, where we don't have 5 people that all do the same thing. We've got 5 people that have different strengths that complement each other, as opposed to having 5 people trying to fight over the same project or same lane, for instance. So you're able to spread that talent around, and really make a high-powered team.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a kind of on the backside of that, I have a story, and I don't know if I'll get into it now, but I had a team leader replace me in Afghanistan, female, who'd never deployed before. And as we all know in Afghanistan, like, a female is not going to be the lead engagement. Like, there is no male to female engagement, right? Like, the local population, like leader is not going to have a conversation with a female. It's just the society, and right or wrong, you can look at it however it is. That's the situation on the ground. But in this moment, I tried to explain that to her, but I also explained, hey, we've never had a female in this area. It's been insanely kinetic. We've never had a female team leader out here. You have an opportunity to do something none of us have been able to do. And I thought that would actually help her establish her niche, where she could be very value added, lead her team forward, and be successful. And it went the other way. And that's a whole nother story for another time. And she basically told me no, and ended up writing a really rough email about beards and not being able to do the job. I don't know. That's another story, another time. But it really does come down to is there's also that challenge of where you think somebody else's niche is going to be may not be what they have in their mind. And as a leader, you have to figure out, because I could look back on this, like, we were peers, but looking back on it is like, could I have done something different? Could I have better explained that? Maybe I was combative, maybe just based on having been there for 10 months at that point. I didn't want to deal. I just wanted her to do what I said. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. But like, was there something I could have done better in that role to help her understand where she'd be value added and maybe not have a negative connotation, which I don't think I was trying to do, but maybe I did. And so it's that aspect too of not just what you think they're going to be good at, but finding, and I think, Chris, to what you said, and I think we know the same person you're talking about if we're talking about fermented goat's milk in the gun truck. But going back to that thought process of finding what they're good at and then helping them take ownership and find that niche themselves. And I think that's really important and really challenging and hard to do as a leader, but you have to think that way. It may not necessarily be what I think. And sure, I can put them in the role and they're going to be productive, but are they going to be the most productive they could be unless I find that right fit for them? And how do I do that? I think mentorship is a key part. Getting to know your team is incredibly important. I had small mentors. I didn't have a very good mentor towards the end of my active duty career. And he changed the way I looked at a lot of things because, one, he was able to tell me strengths I didn't think I had. And 2, he was very good at just checking me when my ego would get in the way and I think I had something and I had to shift and go another direction. So, but anyway, that's a small caveat to this whole piece, which I think adds to the niche discussion.
Yeah, also too, it's really hard to become a mentor if you don't really have a good sense of self, having self-awareness. And that was something that I struggled with for a bit too, because I often come across as kind of rough, intimidating at times is what I've been told. And so you got to be able to really understand your audience, who you're dealing with, and then while also understanding self, be able to adjust based off of how well they'll receive what you have to impart on them. So you have to after any engagement, sit back and reflect on that as well, and think, how did I come across, and then who was the person that was across from me, so that you don't have that, you're not talking past each other, and what's the cost of that? Then it could lead to simply not following the vision, guidance, and direction you put out, or maybe that's an integral person in the organization that could, by not doing their job, leads to mission failure. So you need to make sure that that is some seamless communication and effective engagement by, first of all, knowing self.
I think for me, and I agree, that's a huge part, because I look back on, and I'm sure you guys do this too, I look back on everything I've done, and God, more often than not, instead of looking at like, oh, I did that so well, I'm looking at all the things I did wrong. And I know for a fact there were times that I chose a role and a task that was what I wanted to do versus really where I should have been in that scenario. There are far too many times that I was number 3 man going in the door when I should have been back on the second squad, like managing communications. I just wanted to go in the room. Like and I've done many times I did things like that. And looking back on it, I'm like, oh God, like if I hadn't been better able to self-assess and better able to understand where I best supported my organization, not necessarily what I wanted to do, I think I would have been better at finding my niche and probably would have been more successful as a team. Maybe not for me personally, but I mean, in the end, as a leader, it's not what I do kicking in the door or going in. It's what I do that makes the team successful. The more successful the team is, the more successful I am. It's not whether my name is on what happened in that scenario. It's the end result of the team. And I think that's a big part of niche, even as a leader, is finding where you fit in the role of the organization. It may not be that face line that you want to be. It may not be that sexy role in whatever task you're trying to accomplish. That may be someone else on your team that's better fitted for that niche. And then your ability to push them into that role, make them take ownership, and then be successful is in the end what makes you a good leader. It's tough to do, though. It's hard to do at times, man.
And so what you're doing with that, self-reflection is you're seeking improvement. And as a good leader, you shouldn't be content with the status quo necessarily. You should always seek improvement. And so being able to take that step back, make an evaluation, and implement positive change to continue your growth is really vital in these situations to eventually find your niche.
Sure. And the assessment, both as a leader and self-assessment, it's a continual and ongoing process. And those variables can absolutely change. None of them are finite. And especially depending on things that you're exposed to, your strengths and weaknesses can change over time. Or you might find some that you didn't even know you had. And so part of that is repeated self-assessment and repeatedly putting yourself in situations where you have the opportunity to grow, because that's how you figure that out. So early and often is best, I think, both for learning yourself, learning your team, learning your organization, just challenging all of those systems as early and as often as possible.
Man, we've gone full circle on this one, because I think that closed out pretty well right there, Chris.
Yeah.
That was good. I'm enjoying doing this a lot, because I think where I think the conversation is starting off at is not where it ends up. And it's funny to even find growth myself and looking back like, oh yeah, shit, maybe I did do that wrong. Because you're relearning everything. You go back through it, and every time you relive it, you come out with a different outcome depending on where your mind is at that point and the experiences that have driven you forward. So I don't know, Steve, I'm enjoying this, man. I hope more people start to read the blog. If you guys haven't subscribed to Fancy's blog, do it. It's opened up so you can get onto it and subscribe. And if you want to, make an account on our website. But definitely follow the Without Equal podcast. It's just going to keep getting better. We're at episode number 2. We just hired on a producer for this, Jim Downer, who I'm incredibly excited to have on the team. Jim is going to come on to share his story at some point too, so you get to know him. But just an incredible dude, and stoked to have him on as part of the Without Equal team. So
every time we hop onto the podcast here, and every time I get down to writing the blog, it's an exercise in self-reflection too. So I get real excited about being able to think about these things and in a professional setting.
No,
well, having to verbalize it or put it on paper is different, because there's a lot of these stories or a lot of these anecdotes that we talk about that either I've talked about amongst my very close friends or just internally, but actually having to explain them, actually putting it out there for public consumption, makes you look at it in a little bit of a different light too. So I think there's some growth that comes from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, I know I do, just even talking about that small story in Afghanistan. Like, it takes a lot to be like, oh, I'm putting this out there for public consumption. Like, it makes you really think about that. Like, oh, how did I portray? Like, what did I do in that scenario? How am I portraying that? And how is that going to be portrayed and seen by other people when they look at it in the realm of leadership and just from public perspective? So, yeah, it's a whole nother animal doing this. I'm enjoying it though. I'm really enjoying it. All right. Well, as usual, that's all I got from my end. I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Steve for last comments, final words. And then again, like I said, subscribe and please tune in next week as we pick it up again. So Chris, over to you, and then to Steve.
No, thanks. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, this being the second one I've ever done, not being a huge social media person. It's been pretty interesting, and I think getting a better hang of it. But I appreciate all the interest and look forward to doing more of these. Thanks.
Yeah, in the pursuit of your niche, get the cliche out of the way. If at first you don't succeed, try again, because especially if you're going the route of doing what you love, it might not be what you're really good at. So keep going. Failure is a part of the process, and it brings learning. So do it up.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, and that's our episode for this week. Cheers. Take care.
Cheers.